Good enough. I got figured it out.
You chose Jake Gyllenhaal because you'd seen him in some things. So what was the performance that?
Actually, it was the other way around. I'm sorry if you misunderstood it. Jake actually chose me. I met up with Jake because I was a big fan of his. He had seen Moon, and I was obviously had seen a lot of his films and felt that he was obviously a very talented actor, but a very brave actor too when you just look at the films he'd chosen. And he's one of those guys like Sam Rockwell to me, who's just very empathetic and a leading man, a natural leading man, someone that the audience can immediately bond with, I feel. And we met up trying to find a project to work on together. I had an idea, a suggestion I wanted him to look at, and he came right out and said, I think you should really read the script, source code. And so that was the start of it for me. That's how I became introduced to the script.
Is that unusual for an actor?
I don't know. I don't think it's that unusual for actors of a certain level. But I think yeah, I think they can kind of do that. They can get away with it.
You know, when you came in to talk with when Moon
was
playing here, and we talked about how there's these great looking shots of the lunar landing, and it's just a model being pulled on the line because they didn't have the budget.
Yeah.
You must have had a much bigger budget for this one. Did that make a difference, or does that have more problems, or?
It was the same problems. It was the same problems because absolutely it was a bigger budget, but at the same time, I think as far as our ambition, what we were trying to do with the film, and it was exactly the same deal. We had a whole film where we had so many ideas and not enough money to do them all, and you had to choose your moments. One big difference is obviously we weren't going the model miniatures route. We were going CG for a lot of it. And that really, that became, that's a different approach. It's much more costly. There's a lot more cost involved. But I was working with a very, very talented VFX supervisor from Montreal, a guy called Louis Morin, who's a beautiful blend of technician and artist. So I think between the two of us, we were able to choose our moments and kind of go to town where we could in those moments. But it's still the same old problem. You're trying to. You've got more ideas in your head than you can put on the screen.
Duncan, 2 films now that have a science fiction theme. Do you find that you gravitate to those themes particularly?
I do, and it'll be 3 in a row after I've done my 3rd film. It'll be 3 science fiction films.
Can I ask maybe what that is?
We haven't announced it yet, but that's what I'm actually writing right now. It's going to be what I hope will be my 3rd film. But yeah, I'm a big fan of science fiction, and I love what ifs. I think when I was a kid, I read a lot of science fiction, and I read a lot of J.G. Ballard, who was one of my favorite authors, and the idea of sort of taking the world as we know it and then just tweaking it a little bit, and like the old Weird Science comic books, just like all these great what if scenarios, and I enjoy that. I think it's good fun. I won't do that exclusively for my career, but I think as a starting point. And it just seems to be something I'm having fun with right now.
And this is interesting in that it's an element. It's not a huge science fiction thing. It's just the idea.
It's a conceit. There's a conceit. There's this science fiction technology which allows this story to take place. But we set it in a contemporary setting, and I think there's a lot more to it than just the technology and the conceit. There's a romance. We tried to inject it with some humor. There's a thriller aspect of it. There's quite a traditional thriller, underneath.
Yes.
Which is why, we were trying to make allusions where we could to Hitchcock, because it felt really classic. It felt like an old-fashioned thriller.
It's like Stranger on a Train times 100.
Yeah, with a little bit of sci-fi that's kind of making it all messed up. Yeah.
I was wondering why the Jake Gyllenhaal character didn't end up in a luxurious room instead of a Matrix kind of scary that would frighten him.
Well, I guess the idea was that without getting into too much spoiler territory, but he is manifesting a reality at those points where he's not on the train. When he's on the train, it's basically being dictated because it's the experience of Sean Fentress that he's sort of going through.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's in this sort of holding pen, he has nothing. He has no sensory information being sent to him other than his own experience and the very the minimal amount of sense experience that, as we discover later on, his half corpse is getting from that box that he's in. So he starts off by taking what he knows. He's a helicopter pilot. He's obviously crashed recently, so he's incorporating something which feels and looks a little bit like a helicopter cockpit, and that's where he starts off. And then over the course of the film, that's morphing and changing into something bigger and a more complete understanding of what he really is in. And he ends up in this thing that almost looks and feels like a prison cell. Obviously, it's got the same kind of look and color, and it's made up of the same sort of panels. But it's still him having manifesting an idea of what's going on around him. He goes through a phase where he gets really cold, and that's basically in the box. There's a physiological problem going on, and he's incorporating that into the manifestation.
Got it.
You know? And then there's this big window that starts off in front of him in the cockpit and ends up as a big window at the top of the capsule. That's the glass window that his corpse is sort of facing, that we see at the very end of the movie. It's the very last shot of the film, is we see his face through that glass window. So it's always about, you know, him trying to make sense of his reality.
But I loved how you kept our attention, that you could keep going back, kind of like a science fiction honeymooners.
Right?
Yeah. It was compelling. It was great that you just kept our attention, kept going back in, but it was always different.
Well, that was the trick. I mean, that was the scary thing for me as a director, reading that script the second time. The first time I was able to read it just as an audience member. The second time I was looking at it, how do I make this work? And that repetition became, you know, it was a real, you know, burden to work out how to deal with that in a way where the audience wouldn't feel it was repetitive, and by the end of the film they did feel that like they had been seeing something fresh the whole way through.
It worked, yeah.
Plus, when the scenes start to repeat themselves, there are those keys, the aerial shot of the train.
Yeah.
Or just little things, him waking up on the train.
Yeah.
And then it's fun to watch how it changes with each thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, as long as you set up that very first moment, just to establish, and we're back again.
Right.
Then you've got the butterfly effect working on your side. So as long as something subtle changes, then all of a sudden you can go off in any direction you want. And because Colter is the acting agent, he can do that. He can say something different. He can get up and go somewhere else.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're on a completely different version of events.
How did you decide on Vera?
I had seen her in Up in the Air, and we had already cast Michelle Monaghan, and Vera was someone, I mean, you know, looking at that, we kind of knew that she would be dealing with that most of the film. And Vera's a tremendous actress who knows where the camera is and is able to perform in nuance. So she's really able to give a performance, knowing that, you know, like a news presenter, they're going to have to do everything in this. And you know, that's a real challenge, and you need someone who has that ability to be subtle and do that.
Because it's interesting when the first time she kind of breaks the military facade where he asks a question and she's like lost.
Yeah.
And she becomes our connection between the two of them too, just like
Yeah.
his, you know.
Yeah.
So it is. I just love her performance, but it's just, you know, it's just interesting to see you taking all that talent, just making it great, and it worked. You know?
Well, I actually felt so guilty about it that we did the original script. More of it would have been in that frame, and we decided that we just had to give her the opportunity to break out and walk around a little bit.
For a contemporary setting, I'm intrigued that you chose the Chicago Northwestern, or the South
The
side,
Metro,
right?
yeah.
The Metro.
Yeah.
What? How did that come about?
Well, originally the script was based in New York, and you know, sensitivity issues, terrorism, things like that dictated. The producers felt it was important that we moved it to a different city. We started looking around at other cities in the United States. Obviously, Chicago being somewhere, you know, between East and West. Was something that they liked the sound of. For me, I was huge. I was a huge fan of both the city of Chicago and also the Anish Kapoor sculpture, that mirrored beam. That's a real thing.
I always thought it was like a water drop.
No, it's a metallic sculpture that was built in the city fairly recently, and it's becoming sort of more established now as a Chicago landmark.